Abdullah Abdullah, Mariam Barghouti and Mustafa Barghouti are with me. Let's get straight into it, Dr. Abdullah Abdullah. You're part of the decision making. You're at the table here within the PA. How much responsibility does Palestinian leadership have for where we are now, with the United States moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem?
I don't think the Palestinian leadership has any responsibility for the change of mind in the American administration. This administration even did not follow the line of the previous administrations concerning the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. No doubt that since the beginning of involvement of the United States after Oslo, those who are in charge of following the peace process from the American side have in mind managing the conflict rather than solving the conflict. But still, they cannot ignore international law, they cannot ignore international legitimacy through the United Nations Security Council resolutions. They never condoned the continuation of Israeli settlement building. They never condoned the attacks on the Palestinian movement, infringement on the rights of the Palestinians. This American administration is different on all aspects. This administration came with those who are following the extreme right wing of Israeli politics, the fascist line of Israeli politics from the American administration, and they put them in charge of trying to find a solution. So any solution comes from this group will not be in line with international law or with international legitimacy or with the previous traditional American administration's position.
So, Mariam, as a younger Palestinian living here in Ramallah, does that timeline check out for you? It was better under the previous administrations. The Palestinian leadership doesn't bear responsibility for this. It's all about Trump.
Right. I completely disagree in a sense that the American administration has always been very clear in its position towards Israel. It's been more dormant, and now it's out and overt in their relationship with Israel. They're very outspoken about it, very supportive of it. But it's also, you have to keep in mind that everything Trump is doing now had its infrastructure already laid out by the failure of Palestinian leadership to take into account Palestinian demands, by the failure of any international community to adhere to international law, to place pressure on Israel. In the end, Israel was treating Jerusalem like its capital long before the Trump declaration.
Right. Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, where are we right now? Are we at rock bottom for Palestinian statehood and aspirations? There's a big party happening in Jerusalem. The Israelis are getting international legitimacy from the superpower that is Jerusalem's their undivided capital. It's finished, it's done, isn't it?
No, it's not. And while I do hold the United States administration and Israel responsible for this criminal act, which is a violation of international law, and they're both participating in a war crime of accepting to annex occupied territories by force, I think it's a transformation period. I think the Palestinians now realize how mistaken the previous leadership was in accepting Oslo Agreement, at least without even insisting that settlements should be stopped immediately. I think people understand now that the leadership was deceived by relying on the American administration as a mediator and by relying on negotiations only. I think what you see today is a transformation in Palestine. You see it in Gaza, you see it in Jerusalem and West Bank, of a new Palestinian strategy that has to be adopted. It is adopted at the popular level, and the leadership has to move in that direction, or otherwise they will lose everything. And the new strategy is to concentrate on changing the balance of power through popular resistance, through boycott, divestment, sanctions, through creating unity again between Palestinians, and through steadfastness. Yes, Israel has displaced 70% of the Palestinians in 48. Yes, they are now announcing Jerusalem as their capital, but they are now admitting that the number of Palestinians, after all this oppression for 70 years, the number of Palestinians here is bigger than the number of Israeli Jewish people. We are here, we're not going anywhere, and we will resist.
Abdullah Abdullah, have you been out of touch? Have you and Abu Mazen and everybody been out of touch and naive maybe, trusting the Americans? Hey, you're an honest peace broker here. We can treat you as an impartial observer. Were you naive? Do you feel any regret?
I don't think that was the case. It was not the Americans, but it was the quartet that was created in 2002 to follow on the peace process. The quartet was also governed by respecting the international law. The quartet was also guided by the previous resolutions of the Security Council concerning the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But then it's the Americans who dominated the quartet. That's the fault of the quartet, to allow them to do so. Now, many of them tried sometimes to correct the stand of the Americans. Many statements were stopped by the quartet because they were biased, they were reflecting only the American stand. But still, the Americans could not do, during the quartet time, they could not do what they want as this administration is doing. Take, for example, Resolution 465 against the Israeli settlements in the West Bank. It was supported by the American administration in 1980.
Yeah, but there's one just hanging over my shoulder right now in Ramallah. So, I mean,
Yeah,
ultimately, none of that helped, right?
But at least there is a stand. The Israelis could deceive the international community. There was no strong action to deter the Israelis from doing what they are doing to destroy the peace process. But this administration is coming to share with the Israelis, to put a shoulder to the Israeli policies and do what the Israelis want them to do. That's the difference. And it is not the blame of the Palestinian leadership, but rather the blame of the international community that does not defend the rules upon which the peace was built after the Second World War.
Okay, so Mariam, you have what Mustafa Barghouti also said is a transformation. What's happening on the street versus maybe what was happening with the leadership. So if we can take, for example, what's happening with the border fence in Gaza as the street, whether you believe Hamas is driving it or not, versus negotiations, what's closer to what Palestinians want, ordinary Palestinians?
It's definitely the Gaza situation, and I would disagree that I don't think it's transformative or new. This is something that has been ongoing for decades. You know, Palestinians have been protesting for decades. They had the same demands, the demands to return, the demands for decolonization, for liberation, for dignity. It's not new. And it's the closest echo to Palestinians. It's empowering, it's reclaiming our narrative, our voice, our agency, opposed to placing faith in a leadership that has constantly failed us, and in the US administration that is built on its own colonial past.
What if, Mustafa Barghouti, there's a silver lining here? We saw what Trump is managing to do with North Korea, for example. It's possible that even though he might be aligning himself with a lot of ideologues wherever for his policy, he's a maverick, he's enigmatic, he's pragmatic, he's a deal maker. Maybe, for example, if the new US embassy is in West Jerusalem, might that mean that there's a greater prospect for a Palestinian state with a capital in East Jerusalem?
That is not only wishful thinking, it's more than that. It's totally naive to think so.
Tell me why.
First of all, because what Mr. Trump signed is the Congress decision that the unified Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, which includes East Jerusalem. This philosophy or this approach is the one of those who don't want to do anything about it, or who don't want to resist it, or who want to stay in that horrible line of let's concentrate only on negotiations and on the United States, and maybe they will change their mind. Everything relates to the balance of power, which has to be changed. And this is not Trump alone. This is the evangelical community in the United States. This is the conservative Republican Party siding with Israel. This is a whole structure that is becoming Zionist. And practically his whole team is Zionist.
Right.
I mean, they can be identified as spokesperson for Israel, not for the United States. So in my opinion, no, there is no hope out of this. The only way is to confront them. The only way is for Palestinians to resist. The only way is for us to go into struggle and to change the balance of power. And we will do it, and the people will do it. Of course, the Palestinian leadership has to give up its hesitation. For instance, they have now an opportunity to respond to Trump. Tomorrow, they should immediately refer Israeli leaders to International Criminal Court. That was promised for 2 years but never happened.
Right.
They should immediately join the 22 organizations that Trump doesn't want us to join. We will put him in a difficult position. We have to fight, we have to struggle, and not to wait for good things to come out of the bad thing.
Dr. Abdullah, optics-wise, while all of this was happening, the last I saw of Abu Mazen was him kicking a football in Santiago. Is the leadership not grabbing hold of the situation and using the opportunity to get the international community on the side of the Palestinians?
The leadership has its position declared since 6th of December last, when Trump announced his decision to consider United Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and moving the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. The leadership was very vocal, very clear, and this what galvanized the Palestinian grassroots with the leadership in opposing this decision, resisting this decision to the maximum we can. And all our movement is to gather support for our stand. Abu Mazen, our president, went to the Security Council on the 20th of February. Before that, he went to the European Union in Brussels. Before that, he went to the African Union in Addis Ababa. He went to the Arab Summit in Bahrain.
So you've listed a bunch of it. So because we're running out of time, if you don't mind, and I apologize for interrupting, I want to give the final word to Mariam. Mariam, young Palestinian, is that enough for you? Do you think it will make a difference? Our final thought on this.
I think any approach that we have needs to go and transcend beyond this defeatist mentality that we have. It started with asking for Jerusalem as our capital, then it's East Jerusalem, and we keep giving these concessions. It is time to listen to the people on the ground. It is time to be brave enough to take our internal criticism and move forward, because what is essentially happening in Gaza, what is happening in the streets of the West Bank, what is happening in Haifa and Jaffa is Palestinians saying we can do better together and that we can move forward in our struggle. And it's time to do that. It's time to move our focus from what the US administration is doing, from what Israel is doing, and to really take a look at ourselves and empower ourselves. And that also means criticizing ourselves and our leadership.
Okay, it's been wonderful talking to all of you. Abdullah Abdullah, Mariam Barghouti, Mustafa Barghouti, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.